Hello, my friends. Welcome to Dark Stories English. I'm glad you're here. Now, take a breath and imagine this. A phone is ringing. Late at night, a quiet office, one light on. A young man picks up the phone. On the other end, a stranger, a person in pain, a person who feels completely hopeless. The young man doesn't panic. He speaks slowly, calmly, kindly. He asks the right questions. He listens carefully. And slowly the stranger begins to feel better. The call ends. A life is saved. Now, who is this young man? Is he a doctor? A counselor? A hero? Stay with me, because the answer to that question will disturb you deeply. This is the story of Ted Bundy, and it begins exactly like this, with a phone call and a smile that nobody questioned. The year was 1946. In a small city in Vermont, in the northeastern United States, a baby boy was born. His name was Theodore Robert Bundy. From the very beginning, his life was complicated. His mother was young. She was not married. And in the 1940s, in America, that was considered deeply shameful. So his grandparents made a decision. They would raise Ted as their own son. His mother would pretend to be his older sister. For years, Ted believed this. He grew up thinking his mother was his sister, and his grandparents were his parents. When he discovered the truth as a teenager, something changed inside him. Something quiet, something dark. But nobody noticed, because from the outside, Ted Bundy looked completely normal. He was tall. He was handsome. He had blue eyes and an easy, natural smile. People liked him immediately. He was the kind of person you feel comfortable around, the kind of person you trust without thinking about it. He studied psychology at the University of Washington. He was intelligent, one of the best students in his class. He volunteered for political campaigns. Important people knew his name. And at night, he worked at a crisis hotline, answering calls from strangers in their darkest moments, talking them back from the edge. His supervisor at the hotline was a woman named Anne Rule. She was an experienced crime writer. She had spent years studying dangerous people. She liked Ted. She trusted Ted completely. Years later, she would write one of the most famous true crime books ever published about him. And in that book, she wrote something that still disturbs people today. She said she never suspected anything. Not once. Not a single moment. And that was Ted Bundy's greatest weapon. Not his intelligence. Not his charm. His ability to look completely safe. To look like someone you could trust with your life. But what was really happening behind that smile? And who was paying the price? The year was 1974. And in Washington state, something terrible was beginning. Young women started disappearing. College students. Young women with friends, families, dreams, and whole lives ahead of them. One week, a woman was gone. The next week, another. No bodies. No witnesses. No clear evidence. Just gone. The police were confused. The families were desperate. And the city was afraid. Then survivors came forward. Women who had escaped. Women who could describe what happened. They described a man, handsome, well-dressed, friendly. Sometimes he wore a fake cast on his arm. Sometimes he walked on crutches. He would approach women in parking lots, in libraries, near university buildings. He would ask for help carrying books, moving something to his car. He seemed harmless. He seemed like someone who needed help. That was the point. Ted Bundy had studied human behavior. He understood something deeply uncomfortable about people. We trust attractive people. We help people who seem vulnerable. We lower our guard around someone who smiles at us. Bundy used all of this, deliberately, carefully, like a hunter who has studied his prey for years. But what made him truly dangerous was something else entirely. He didn't stay in one place. That was his strategy. He moved between states: Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado. Each time he moved, women disappeared. Each time, the police in that state started their own investigation, and nobody connected the cases. Because in the 1970s, there was no national database, no computer system to share information between states. A killer could move from one state to another and essentially become invisible. Bundy understood this perfectly. He planned for it. In 1975, police in Utah stopped his car late one night. They looked inside. What they found was disturbing. Rope, handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar. Bundy explained calmly that these were camping supplies. The officer was suspicious, but he had no direct evidence. He let Bundy go. That decision would have terrible consequences. He was eventually arrested, connected to a kidnapping in Utah. But he was not finished, not even close. In 1977, Ted Bundy escaped from prison. Not once, twice. The first time, he jumped from a courthouse window during a hearing. He was caught 8 days later. The second time, he was more patient. He slowly cut a hole in the ceiling of his cell, night after night, a little more each time, until finally the hole was large enough. He crawled through the building in the darkness. He walked out into the cold night air, and he disappeared. Nobody noticed until the next morning. By then, he was already gone, and the most dangerous period of Ted Bundy's life was about to begin. He drove south, all the way to Florida, and there, on the night of the 14th of January 1978, something happened that shocked even the detectives who had spent years chasing him. In the early hours of the morning, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Inside, young women were sleeping. In less than an hour, he attacked 4 of them. 2 of them never recovered from the attack. The violence was extreme, different from anything before, more desperate, more brutal. Investigators who arrived at the scene that morning said they had never seen anything like it. Something had changed in Bundy. He was becoming more dangerous and more careless. 3 weeks later, He kidnapped a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach from her school. She was the youngest of his known victims. Her case would become one of the key pieces of evidence against him. On the 15th of February 1978, a police officer in Pensacola, Florida, ran the plates on a suspicious Volkswagen, driving slowly in the early morning hours. The car was stolen. The officer turned on his lights. The car tried to speed away. A chase followed. The officer caught up. The driver was arrested. He gave a false name, but the officer was patient. Fingerprints were taken, and the results came back. The man in handcuffs was Ted Bundy. After years of disappearances, escapes, and terror across multiple states, the nightmare was over. The trial that followed was unlike anything America had seen before. It was broadcast live on television. An estimated 40 million people watched, and what they saw confused many of them, because Ted Bundy, even in court, was charming. He smiled at the cameras. He acted as his own lawyer. He cross-examined witnesses confidently. He seemed almost normal. Some women in the public gallery said they found him attractive. Letters arrived at the prison for him from women who believed he was innocent, who believed he was misunderstood. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bite mark evidence connected him directly to the Chi Omega attacks. Witness testimony placed him at multiple locations. Fiber evidence connected him to Kimberly Leach. On the 24th of July, 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders. He was sentenced to death. In a separate trial, guilty again for the murder of Kimberly Leach. Another death sentence. For years he appealed. He delayed every way he could. He offered to confess to other murders in exchange for more time. Investigators agreed because they needed answers for the families of missing women. He confessed to 30 murders across 7 states, but many investigators believe the real number was much higher. Some estimates say more than 100 victims. Nobody knows the true number. And that uncertainty, that open wound, is something the families of his victims have carried for decades. On the 24th of January, 1989, at 7:16 inches the morning, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison walls, crowds had gathered through the night. Some held candles. Some held signs with the names of his victims. Some cheered when the announcement came, and some simply stood in silence, thinking about the women who never came home, the men who had fooled so many people for so long was gone. And so the story of Ted Bundy comes to an end. But one question remains. How did so many people trust a man like this? The answer is uncomfortable, because Bundy didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone you would help, someone you would trust, someone you might sit next to in a library and never think twice about. And that is worth remembering. Pay attention to the people around you. Listen carefully. The truth is not always on the surface. You stayed with this story until the end. You followed a complex, dark narrative in English. That takes real effort. And that effort is how you grow. Keep listening. Keep learning. This is Dark Stories English. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. More dark stories are waiting for you here. Next week, Jack the Ripper, the killer who was never identified. More than 130 years later, the case still has no answer. Leave a comment. What surprised you most about Ted Bundy? I would love to hear your voice. See you next week.